Marginal gains, what does that term mean to you? This is one of the most hyped terms in cycling right now. It's often accredited to David Brailsford.
One of the terms that I've been associated with is this marginal gains idea. It's something that I came up with a few years ago in order to try and describe what was then more of a philosophy than an actual tangible.
And you remember David Brailsford came to work from Planet X Bikes to British Cycling in 2003. Prior to 2003, from 1959 to 2003, British Cycling had only won one Olympic gold medal. After Dave Brailsford came, enabled the team to win 16 golds up to the current time. Of course, he went to work for Team Sky, and you all know about Team Sky's success. I don't need to tell you about that. But is that success of British Cycling down to those marginal gains? Or is it down to a £30 million lottery grant that he got in the 4 years running up to the Olympics? Similarly for Team Sky, Team Sky's marginal gains what really gives them the edge on the world tour? Or is it their 35 million euro budget that they spend keeping them at the top of the Premier League of world teams? Okay, so we need to define marginal gains. And that term marginal gains means the aggregation or the cumulative stacking up of lots of small effects, typically cited as around about a 1% gain over baseline. And the important thing is that those effects add up over time in a way that is cumulative or compound. In fact, if you want to understand this is nothing really new. In finance, everyone knows about compound interest, and that is the same principle of marginal gains. There's no end of compound interest calculators online right now. And in the world of industry, Toyota used marginal gains for years in their Kaizen principle. And in fact, they asked their employees for 1,800 ideas that might improve the factory line efficiency. And in chess, that great 19th century player, Wilhelm Steinitz, apparently used to use that strategy of small incremental additions to defeat his opponent. And chess players have known about marginal gains for hundreds, if not thousands of years since that game was invented in the 6th century AD. So what we can conclude is marginal gains is really nothing new. And that David Brailsford, Team Sky and British Cycling have just popularised the term. In fact, if you do a Google search, you'll find that there's over 3,000 academic papers mentioning the term marginal gains prior to 2003, when that term was popularised by David Brailsford and Team Sky. So I want to take you through some myths now. I want to take you through some myths that underline this concept of marginal gains. And hopefully this will help you re-look at marginal gains in a different way. Myth number one is not really a myth, it's a misunderstanding. And that misunderstanding is that marginal gains are a simple addition of that 1% rule. If it was a simple addition of that 1% rule, like 1% every day for a week, then after a week you'd have, what, a 7% increase. But actually it's not an additive effect that you need, it's a compounded effect. So that the 1% gain from day one has to be increased by not just 1% on day two, but 1% on top of the baseline and on top of your original marginal gain. So each marginal gain has to be increased the following day. But if you do that, if you work it out, what would happen over the course of a year? Well, over the course of a year, let's say you start with a baseline, let's say power of 100 watts on day one, and then you fast forward to day 365. After 365 days of 1% increase, if it was simple addition, you'd have 465 watts, right? But in the marginal gains compounding, you actually have 3,744 or 37 times the original. The effect of compounding is so large over time that it completely outweighs the effect of simple addition. Myth number two is that marginal gains are absolute gains. So that if you make a change of 1%, you're going to reap the benefit of that 1% in absolute terms. But in truth, you're usually already semi-optimized. You've already probably got a decent drivetrain. You've already probably got decent tires. You've already probably looked at your aerodynamics. So marginal gains are really a law of diminishing returns. The more you go, the harder it is to make a difference. And that's why the effect is actually not sustained with time. It's a diminishing effect, in my opinion, not a compounding effect. Myth number 3 is that marginal gains are stackable together. And this is really important, because if they're stackable, like each one can add to the next one, then sure, they'll quickly accrue. But actually in cycling, they're often not stackable, they're often interdependent. Consider this. So let's say I want to buy a super light climbing set of wheels to improve the weight of the bike. Well, sometimes the light climbing wheels are less aero. In other words, the gains in one area offsetting the gains in another, which tells me that the areas don't always stack together in a neat way. Myth number 4 is that the marginal gain in your predictor variable, such as aerodynamics or coefficient of friction or rolling resistance, will give you the same marginal gain in your outcome, which for the cyclist is basically speed. But it doesn't work like that, because your environment is heavily influencing what happens on the bike. In other words, wind, air pressure, environmental conditions. So for example, if you were to change the drivetrain efficiency by, let's say, improving the bearings on the rear pulley derailleur system, because the rear pulley is only contributing a tiny percentage to the overall speed. Even if you optimize the entire drivetrain is probably contributing around 5% to the overall losses determining the speed on the bike. So if you made a 1% change in the drivetrain efficiency, you wouldn't get a 1% change in the bike speed. At most, you get a 1% times 5% change in bike speed, which is actually 0.005. Related to that, myth number 5 is that a 1% gain in aero would be the same as a 1% gain in coefficient of friction or 1% change in roll resistance. That obviously isn't the case, as we've just seen. In fact, they're heavily influenced by your exact variables on the bike, your personal variables, such as your typical riding speed or your weight for yourself and the bike combined. Fortunately, our new calculator takes those into account and gives you a rough estimate of how a hypothetical marginal gain would be translated into improvements in your speed. But myth number 6 is another big one, and that is that marginal gains are repeatable time and time again. You see, the reason this compounding effect, this compounded interest effect works is because the gains get added together and previous gains get improved by new gains. Now the problem is with marginal gains in cycling is that additive gains, 1, don't necessarily stack together, but 2, become difficult to repeat. Let's consider an example. Let's consider optimizing your pedal. So you take an unoptimized pedal. First thing you're going to do, make it lighter. Let's take a pedal made out of carbon now. Okay, it's lighter. Next, what you're going to do, that's day 1 of gains. Day 2 of gains. Okay, I'm going to make the pedal more aero, like the Speedplay, aero pedal. Okay, that's a good way to go. You've done day 2. What are you going to do on day 3? Day 3, I'm going to improve the coefficient of friction in the bearings. Okay, day 3 done. Day 4, I'm going to reduce the Q factor by changing the cleat position. Day 5, okay, I'm struggling now. Day 5, I'm going to reduce the stack height. So it makes it slightly more aero. Okay, I've done 5 days. Guys, I've done 5 days, but I'm getting stuck. I've got 360 days to go to really give me 1 year of maximum marginal gains. Doing the first few gains in an unoptimized system is relatively easy. Continuing in that indefinitely, relative to other experts, extremely hard, guys. And that leads us to myth 7. Myth 7 is that marginal gains are novel to you. If you were the only one thinking of them, great, happy days. You can be the first one to put in ceramic bearings, or you can be the first one to have that aerodynamic frame. But as you know, these days, almost every time trialist is thinking about marginal gains. Every professional team is thinking about marginal gains. Your predecessor in your job looking at marginal gains for your bike company has also been looking at marginal gains. Dave Brailsford's successor in British cycling, Tony Purnell, is thinking right now, gosh, where do I go? All the low-hanging fruit has already been taken. It's going to be super hard to make a change right now. And these are down to micro marginal gains, which probably, come on guys, how much of a difference is that going to make? Myth number 8 is that marginal gains are all measurable, but some of Brailsford innovations like better pillows or changing the hotels or vacuuming the rooms or washing the hands, come on guys, those things are really difficult to measure. So good ideas, they may still be good ideas, but they're hard to measure in terms of cycling performance. Now, I'm going to illustrate this to you in a quick and simple calculator that Fast Fitness Tips has put together here. You can download this using the link below.
Calculator. I'll give you a bit of orientation here. So in the top here in yellow, you start with your baseline value. That could be power, aero, weight, CRR, drivetrain, friction. You don't need the unit, just put the absolute number in. So let's do watts as an example. Let's start at a ride of 100 watts. We want to see over 28 days of gains at, let's say, 0.5%. So just put in 0.5% cycle, 0.5% increment. What would be the effect over 28 days from 100 watts? Well, you'd end up with 114 watts, 14.99 of gains, or 1.15 the original. However, in section F, that's washed out to some extent because only 68% of those gains would be represented in the real world speed. That is for a ride of 80 kilograms going 40 kph. Obviously, if you're going much slower, 20 kph, then you might realize more of those gains. Let's put in an example of weight. Let's say an 80 kilogram rider, and you want to, let's say, lose 0.2% per day over the course of 28 days. Then you want to put in minus 0.2, and then at the end of 28 days you would be 75.63 kilograms, so you'd lose 4.36. But unfortunately that weight would only translate into about 1.2 kilograms of actual losses, because 29%, the weight makes 29% contribution to your overall speed at 20 kph and 80 kilos. Obviously you can vary these figures to suit you. And at the bottom here, one last thing, if you, instead of entering your number of iterations, if you just want to put your target, so let's say you're a rider of 250 watts and you want to know how long it will take to go to 300 watts, and you want to make a cycle change increment, if you like, of 0.5%, then it would take you, here it works out, 36.56 days to go from 250 to 300 watts at an increment of 0.5% increase per day, guys.
Myth number 9 is that marginal gains are always achievable. So if you have an idea, if you have a bright idea, is it achievable? For example, I might have an idea for a super thin aerodynamic spoke in a new wheel, but will it compromise the rigidity of the wheel? I might have an idea for a super thin carbon stem might compromise the structural rigidity. And we've already seen examples of how pro and world tour riders have rejected some of the innovations that have come because they've considered them dangerous. So not every idea is going to be translated into a real world effect, even if it's a good idea. Myth number 10, guys, is that these marginal gains are cheap. Once you start talking about super marginal gains, micro marginal gains, then we're talking about things that can be phenomenally expensive. Redesigning the entire frame, redesigning your wheels. How much did it cost, for example, American Cycling to change the drivetrain to the inner side, the left side of the bike, so that it would be on the inner side of the velodrome as the cyclists went around? How much did it cost to make that change? And what was the marginal gain that resulted? Did it result in any big savings? Well, I'm not sure if it did, guys, because the results, judging by the riders on those bikes, certainly didn't seem to be worth the effort in that case. Well, tell me if you disagree. Wow, guys, that's my attempt to demystify marginal gains, that hugely hyped area in cycling. And let me just be clear in closing, I'm not saying marginal gains don't exist at all. Clearly they exist in some areas. I'm just saying the marginal gains effect is marginal. I'm saying that they don't always work as advertised. And you've got to look at the detail. The devil is in the detail, as they say. And I'm, by the way, not the only one saying marginal gains are not the be-all and end-all of cycling. That big hero of British cycling, Bradley Wiggins, recently said this. A lot of people made a lot of money out of it, and Dave Brailsford used it as his constant calling card, but I always thought it was a load of rubbish. It's a bit like the whole chimp thing. He's referring there, by the way, to the Steve Peters equally suspect chimp theory. At the end of the day, chimp theories and marginal gains and all these buzzwords, a lot of the time, I just think you've got to get the fundamentals right. Go ride your bike, put the work in. You're either good or you're not good. That's what makes you a better athlete, your physical ability, whether you've trained enough, not whether you've slept on a certain pillow or mattress. All right, that's straight from Bradley Wiggins. Make up your own mind, guys. I'm just giving you information here to make you aware that marginal gains don't always work as advertised. But as always, make your own minds up, keep an open mind, and have a good ride. Take care, guys.
Hey guys, if this video was useful or there's something valuable in here for you, please do Fast Fitness Tips a favor and share this video with one of your friends or somebody who you think would benefit from it. Thanks a lot guys, that will help support the channel.